Hey everyone, welcome into our latest Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Deals. We're going to be talking about cannabis as usual here today. One company in particular announced their latest earnings. They described it as their best year yet. Who was it? Avicanna. Stock was up over 40% at one point this week as cannabis caught a little bit of a bid here in the middle of this week, but it all started with Avicanna. So why was it their best year ever? Well, let's find out and welcome back their CEO, Aras Azadian, to the podcast. Good to see you, sir. How are things? Good week. Nice week.
Yeah, finally. We're getting there.
Nice. Yeah, I know you've been on a few times and you keep talking about some of the stuff that you've been doing due diligence wise, day in and day out. And a lot of people, obviously, in this space right now, let's face it, are still hoping for upside potential, but they're frustrated with reform. They get frustrated. But we've talked about we're in a period now of this space, especially the next 18 months. It's all about execution and fundamentals. And your latest earnings really describe that. But before we get into some of the numbers, you describe this as your best year yet. Is that really the big takeaway from your latest press release?
Absolutely. I mean, we generated nearly $26 million. The year before that, we were in the 16 million range. So I know,
Yeah.
If you compare that to the recreational companies, in terms of the actual absolute numbers, is not as high. But if you think about it from a medical perspective, we're a pure medical company, and we're not just demonstrating significant year over year growth. We're actually improving in our gross margins. We're improving in our profits.
Saw that.
And we're seeing the revenue grow, and the SG&A or the cost growth is substantially lower in terms of a percentage change. So we're demonstrating really what is a real medical business model, and how that separation that I've been alluding to for several years now, 9-10 years. Not only is that essential for the industry, for the patients, for the medical community, but it actually does demonstrate its own more feasible business model in which you do have stickier patients, higher margins. It's one that takes longer. It's one that
Yep.
but in the long term, it creates entry barriers and it creates the opportunity to scale and internationalize. And I think it's our best year because we're demonstrating self-sufficiency. So from our conventional sort of medical cannabis business, we're demonstrating the ability to continue to execute and deliver, grow, but still continue to innovate and do research and clinical trials, which are really the home runs. And I think the simplified way I like to present it is that my singles and doubles are now funding my own home runs,
Which is great.
which is impossible in the healthcare biotech space normally. But I think the limitations, the constraints, the stigma associated to being a cannabinoid based company has made us kind of transform into this self-sufficient company. And I think it's important. After 9 years in the seat, finally I can say, okay, we're stabilized, we're good on our own, and now let's go work on the home runs and let's go duplicate and replicate these business models internationally, which we could, because medical is an international opportunity.
I know. I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and I just think right now, we've always been talking about the American market and the recreational play, and will there be some sort of reform in banking taking place? And the number one thing I got from being at that conference was the huge international opportunity that's happening with medical cannabis. I can't emphasize on that enough, especially what we learned about in the EU. What are you seeing that you could really communicate to our viewers about the upside potential? Because let's face it, we all know Canadian company cannabis, we went through the drama in the early days, inflated valuations, inflated balance sheets, that sort of stuff. And now we're in a stage where it's all about execution, especially when we talk about a consolidation period that's taking place. But when you're in front of people that are learning more about your story, about the true international opportunity from a medical play, what do you say to them?
I think medical is the way to go. And I think at a super macro, high level, long term perspective, with medical, you're addressing pain, sleep, anxiety,
Yeah.
depression, epilepsy, other neurological disorders. Way bigger market opportunity, right? We're not talking about the recreational market opportunity, which I think is massive as well. Of course it is. But we don't look at the market as I'm going to sell joints to someone, or I'm going to do the next
Exactly.
pre-roll or the next infused pre-roll, because that's a very distinct sort of population of people that want those products. And it's massive opportunity. I personally believe pain, sleep, anxiety, depression are bigger, and they are by market size. So I think from a macro perspective, that's a bigger opportunity. Now,
Yeah.
to dive in more from a cannabinoid perspective, well, cannabinoids are still narcotics, right? And due to the single convention on narcotics in the United Nations, you cannot theoretically export recreational cannabis into another recreational market anyways.
Hmm.
So the market becomes medical. So from a medical perspective, we have exported to 21 countries. They're small, they're sort of, just milestones in terms of opening the pathway or the gateway, but we have demonstrated that the international market opportunity for medical is there, and we've demonstrated the regulatory sort of expertise to be able to accomplish those. And I think now you're starting to see these new markets open up more and
You
more.
do.
EU, Germany, UK, especially, of course, but then you have other markets that are opening. Where I think the opportunity lies in the short term is, yes, for the Canadian licensed producers or even us, like we're producing flower in Colombia, we can ship, sustainable organic flower we can ship. That's a great short term opportunity. And I think you're going to see some of the Canadian licensed producers put up some good numbers in the next year. The ones that are exporting, and I think everyone's now going to be exporting.
I
However,
know.
I believe that's going to commodify to a certain extent because you're going to have the Colombian and the other developing country markets that are going to be able to produce at a lower cost. But the
Yep.
other trend that I expect is that within those markets, you're going to see an evolution of the portfolio and the type of products. Because right now, you're still seeing 90% flower inhaled products, and you're never going to really obtain proper medical community adoption if all you're telling physicians is prescribe my joints. And I think we
Exactly.
saw that in Canada, right? When we had only medical, it was a lot of flower, and then when you separated with adult use and medical, the medical side became a lot more medical. And we see that from our patient population on MyMedi. A lot of oncology patients are on a lot of neurology patients, and inhaled products only represent about 30% of our sales now. So
Exactly.
that's a massive change, and
Huge.
you will see.
These things take time, and I get it. And you're right. From a medical perspective, like I don't understand, obviously, well established in the medical field from what you're focusing on, but outside looking in, there needs to be a lot of different choice. But there is still that stigma that obviously plays into that. And one of the things that you have to really understand and educate are these doctors to like look at it differently and to really to prescribe a lot of this stuff. But in the EU, which I thought was impressive, is like even pilot episodes that are programs that they're doing in France.
Yeah,
They're getting backup and support from governments. And the big thing that I learned, and this is where it gets kind of blurred a little bit in the US, is the messaging. In Europe, it's all about medical first, and they're getting the support that they're going to need, and as you said, as you're adapting and doing what you're doing, it's the medical program does take time, but finally we're starting to really understand where this could possibly be. But one of the things you just highlighted was those are things down the road, but some of the short-term success, when we talk about some of these numbers, you achieved a record revenue of $25.5 million. That was marking 52% year over year growth. So impressive leap. Can you maybe share with us a little bit of like what was behind all that as to like why there was such a huge increase in revenue?
yeah. I think the major catalyst was the acquisition of the Shoppers Drug Mart, which is a Canadian pharmacy chain, their
Yep.
cannabis division. We acquired that towards the end of 2023. So 2024 was our first full year of that. And within that platform, we've been able to then optimize, improve the type of products that are offered to patients, improve the educational resources for the medical community, improve patient support programs. So combining that with what was already our Canadian products, medical products that were available
Yep.
on Shoppers, on Spectrum, on other medical platforms, has really been the catalyst of the major revenue growth. And in parallel, that's been an incredible proof of concept for us because now we have the A to Z in medical. We have the
Hmm.
proprietary products that have gone through preclinical or clinical trials. They're advanced drug delivery systems. We have the medical platform in which the patients now have access to these products, but also have access to dosing and titration and actual patient journey. We have the resources to educate the medical community. I think I told you, Shad, about the symposium we're hosting in about a month and a half,
Yep.
which is going to be, again, some of the biggest key opinion leaders in the world are coming in to Avicanna's annual symposium where we're going to be presenting research. So I think in Canada, what you see with that 25 million revenue is really a very well built, I would argue, the most comprehensive medical cannabis package that exists today in the world. And I think what you're seeing is that sort of developed now. And I think there's
Yep.
certainly room for that to scale and grow in Canada. But the part that's really exciting for me is the internationalization of that. And I think that's what you're going to see in the next few years.
So with that acquisition, and you said now you have the proper resources, I guess how sustainable is the increase in revenue? Like, was this more revenue that was caused by like a one-time acquisition, or do you see this being with the resources that you have now being sustainable for a long period of time?
I think we'll continue to see revenue growth. I think this was a major one, obviously, in terms of the percentage growth. But what you'll
Yep.
see now is that you have a base. That base will grow in Canada. I think that base, or again, the combination of our proprietary products and MyMedi, will be replicated elsewhere. So you'll see international growth. What we also saw is more maturity of our business units elsewhere. So our Colombian operations and the export business model there, some of our topical products being exported out of Colombia, all of these things are now slowly maturing. So of
Yep.
course, Canada was the most mature market, let's say from a federal legislation perspective, but that this base has now given us not only strength to stabilize and grow within Canada, but also to be able to invest in the other commercialization or business units that we have elsewhere. And of course, to invest in innovation again, right? To be able to advance these clinical studies and the projects.
Yep. Yeah, execution, as we keep talking about, is something that's important. So another figure that kind of stood out to me was in your earnings report is the improvement of gross margins. It rose to 51% in 2024 from 40% in 2023. This is coupled with a 94% increase in gross profits to 12.9 million. So off of that, what specific strategies, were put in place to like really identify and outline these numbers that I just outlined?
Yeah, and I think and appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's important because people still have this confusion, or they don't see the distinction between medical and adult use, right? And I think if you're going to skip everything else, if you're going to skip different type of consumers versus patients, quality, formulations, just look at the margins, right? And just at the gross
Good
margin
point. Good point.
perspective, it's there. It's clear. We're operating at a biotech, biopharma, or even tech level gross margins and gross profits in terms of a percentage, right? And that is a demonstration of entry barriers. That's a demonstration that the 10 years or 9 years we spent on R&D formulation development to create these proprietary products, to provide a full package of MyMedi, to provide pharmaceutical opportunities that is now already yielding licensing fees, that stuff is yielding higher margins than any cannabis company really that I've seen in the industry can put up, right? And that's a validation that our business model that is strictly medical and intellectual property focused
Good point.
does have higher margins. So for us, we're at a point where if we have marginal growth in 2025, if we have a 15% growth, we're profitable, right?
Which is huge.
And you're seeing an incredible trend. Not only in the revenue is increasing, but the gross margins have improved, and the gross profits, obviously, as a function of that, have improved. But the gross margin improvement is attributed to the quality of the formulations, technology, services that we're providing, and then, of course, within that, optimization efforts.
Yeah. Well, you just said you're profitable going into 2025 with a 15% increase. Your EBITDA loss narrowed significantly, improving by 68% to just 1.4 million in 2024. This is compared to 4.3 million in 2023. So, a lot of that stuff, it's the maturing of an industry, I could say. And, you look at this, how long have you been now CEO? Has it been 9 years, you said?
Yeah, October will be 10 years. It's been a
Long
long
time,
time.
right?
Yeah.
But good for you to stick within the lane that you're in, because we all knew that there was a lot of broken promises on medical cannabis and what it was basically representing. Because we've had, and I don't need to name companies, but you're right. They talk about recreational and medical from both sides of the mouth. And that's a number of companies. That's not just one or two.
Yeah.
But how much of advantage is it right now with what you're doing in a federally legalized country? You're down in Colombia. You're talking about exporting out into like, the EU, Australia, a number of those things. But how much, background research and opportunities does it present to be operating in a country that is federally legalized versus countries that are still in the status quo, which is unknown? But yes, we could eventually legalize it federally one day.
I think what we've built, and I'm certainly biased, but what we've built is a perfect combination of Canadian R&D, clinical piloting, commercialization, engaging with the medical community, and then we combine that for the long term with the Colombian organic, sustainable, low cost supply chain, and that's the perfect model in a very simplified fashion. But if you want to now add regulatory, industry pains, all of these other complexities, is why it's taken us so long to be able to validate that. But we are now validating. We are now exporting out of Colombia in 20 something countries. But going back to your federal legislation or the Canadian, let's say, sandbox that we've built, it's an incredible place for us to test things. It's an incredible place for us to do clinical trials, to engage with the medical community. And now we announced, a recent partnership where we're working with a company called Aspea, that we're doing a lot more medical affairs and engagements with the medical community. And some of the examples of that is the Canadian Pain Society, for example. Three
Right.
weeks from now, they have a massive event, thousands of physicians. We're a key sponsor. We're a key speaker. We have 5 engagements or 5 activations within the Canadian Pain Society annual meeting. That's a big deal, like that's a
So
big deal.
what's on the agenda that day then? Like, what is the message you want to get through to them, and what are you anticipating going into that room?
So I think, first of all, the fact that we're part of it, like they let us, as a cannabis company or associated cannabis company, to be part of it. We have various activations. There's the Consortium for Investigation of Cannabis. There is the Clinical Trial Network of Cannabis. And then there is the actual like Pain Society events, migraine group, oncology group. There is, the veterans groups. There's a lot of these various activations. It's a comprehensive event for a few days, and it's led by
Yeah.
Dr. Hans Clark, who's the president of Canadian Pain Society. And we're there every day. We have our own roundtables. We have our own smaller events with key opinion leaders. So we're there, and our message there is a separation between medical and adult use. There is potential benefits to their patients, and they need to be open their eyes and look at
Yep.
the data, look at the research, and we are the right partners for them to engage with, whether it's for insurance coverage, whether it's for having an actual treatment plan outlined for their patients. And we are serious. That's the message, is that we are the most serious medical company in Canada, and we're there
Good.
to engage with the medical community. And stop sending your patients to dispensaries. That's the
Yeah.
message.
That's the biggest thing, and you're even seeing on the CPG side. It's like as beverages more and more start to expand on the recreational side, it needs to be available and not just dispensaries. Because let's face it, it's just, I get it for the avid cannabis consumer. That's where they like to go. But for somebody that doesn't understand the space at all, they want options and really don't want to be going into a dispensary at all. But do you think, in some ways, focusing on the medical side again, that because there's just been adult use medical, the message has been blurred somewhat? Is there actual real research there? That's been the main reason why doctors have been apprehensive about the space for quite some time.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's one, when medical was the only channel, the type of companies that were going out
Yeah.
there presenting themselves as pure medical companies really weren't, and when the doctors would engage with them, whether it was for research trials and things like that, which they ultimately abandoned in terms of the licensed producers, they saw that not only these companies don't really understand patient journeys, they don't really understand or provide the resources for the medical community to want to adopt it. There was no data, there's no work done, and then the type of
Right.
products that they had offered back then was, all right, Dr. Smith, prescribe or recommend my platform to your patients where they can buy my weed. And that did not sit very well with a lot of the physicians. And I think
Why would it? Right.
exactly. And a lot of them actually did adopt it. So we did have a significant medical market in the earlier days prior to recreational. That was because you had these cannabis clinics, and you had a lot of people claiming to have back pain just to get access to weed. But when legalization happened from an adult use perspective, those consumers, let's say, moved on to adult use because it's much easier, right? It's access. You just walk in, you pick your favorite flower, your favorite edible, and you walk out. And I think now there was a gap, right? So the medical community felt neglected. The medical community felt like, well, I'll just send my patients to dispensaries, and I think that sort of distrust was created. And I think we are in a very unique situation or position because of our, credibility, because of the research, because of the type of products that we actually want to market to physicians in terms of
Yeah.
educating them. We're
Yeah.
going in there and we're saying, look, I actually have, very controlled dose formulations that are non-inhalable. So that
Which is what they want. Which is what they
and then
want.
we can show them data. We can show them pharmacokinetic data. We can show them information that they would not expect. So we're trying to bring them back out of that, and we're trying to say you shouldn't send your patients to a dispensary where they talk to a 19-year-old bud tender rather than coming to our platform where they're speaking to a pharmacist. So
Yeah.
there's a whole different journey, and then I think we're
Just a tad difference there, right?
and
Yeah.
insurance coverage. So we're trying to re-educate them. Look, there's insurance
Of
coverage.
course.
70% of our patients are not paying out of pocket, right? So there's
Yeah.
these type of things, and I think it's going to take time. And we're very, very lucky to have the luxury of engaging with the medical community, to have our own symposium in June, to be at the Canadian Pain Society event in May. So we're doing all these activations, which is why I really do believe we're going to be able to scale this sort of built model now, both domestically and internationally.
Well, to get the respect that you want in the medical field, you need research and development, and you just outlined that. And let's give some examples because I know you made some significant strides with this, such as the real world evidence study in the epidermal. Oh, I always get tongue.
Epidermolysis bullosa. That's a tough one. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. But
Yeah.
first up, for those unaware of the study, maybe outline quickly what it is and as they learn more about your story.
Yeah, I think that one's very close to our heart. So that's a hospital for sick children. It's the largest
Okay.
children's hospital in Canada. We conducted a study on EB, which is a rare orphan sort of indication where children essentially have these blisters or wounds don't heal. They actually refer to it as a worse disease that most people are not aware of. They
Hmm.
have these wounds, they're covered in gauze, and they have a really, really terrible experience. A lot of the kids don't get to, grow to be adults. And this is a study that they approached us about, and Dr. Elena Pope, she's the head of dermatology at Sick Kids, several years ago. We created a specific formulation for them. It's 3% CBD, so there's no THC. These kids are not getting high from this. And we were able to conduct a really successful study in which we were able to measure the wound healing, but also pain and itch reduction. To me, that was a fantastic signal, and we're going to now take that, hopefully this year, if not early next year, into an actual RCT, more of an FDA sort of Health Canada pathway for a drug, like a randomized control trial, because we've had the early signals. So that was a great study. We had another study that was closed off last year, which was on a deep tissue gel, which is a transdermal gel for localized inflammatory pain. Again, we tested on a number of more local pain indications, from arthritis, fibromyalgia, post-surgical pain. Great results
Yep.
again. That gives me the signal to proceed. What's unique about our sort of medical to pharma, let's say, pathway is that those products are available on MyMedi, though they are also medical products today, but one day will be pharmaceuticals. And I think these early signals we're
Right.
getting is really de-risking our pharmaceutical pipeline.
So, how familiar are, I guess, members with the Canadian Pain Association aware of this trial, aware of some of the results that have been reported? Like, has there been much dialogue, or is that going to be at the forefront with your messaging at this event once you attend next month?
So another study, which was in the press release as well, was the excuse me, the observational study,
Bless you.
real world
Bless
evidence
you.
study. Thank you. The observational real world evidence study, which was for pain, sleep, anxiety. And that's actually led by Dr. Hans Clark, who is the president of Canadian Pain Society. So he's going to be presenting that. So he's going to be presenting the early results.
All right.
And the messaging there is really, look, this is happening. There's data, there's packages, and it's done by Dr. Clark, who's the president. So that's going to carry a lot of weight, I think, at the event. That's why we're there, to talk about that. And I think that more and more of those results will come out. And as these result packages come out, not only are they guiding our pharmaceutical pipeline, but they're also giving us the tools to further engage with the medical community, to create pharmacoeconomic packages and go to more insurance companies and say, hey, look at this. Look at the benefits of pain, sleep, anxiety when you're using the appropriate products and doses of cannabinoids. And I think that's really what we're doing. It's a longer play. And I'm very happy to say that we are now in a place where we can stand on our own 2 feet while we
Yeah,
work
it's
on these longer projects.
it's nice just to see it's the maturing of an industry. As I realize that people lack patience, especially in the investment community in this day and age when cannabis officially launched. But these things do take time, and here we are today. But it's the maturing of an industry, and trials do take time. But the most important thing is the data that's being reported, and you get this in front of the right people, which you will next month at this event. But you're in Colombia right now. We all know that some of these healthy margins have gotten real good based on what you're doing down there and the exporting that you're basically doing across the world. When we look at the remainder of 2025 going into 2026, what areas, I guess, are you focusing interest you most as far as growth potential? Is it the EU? Is it Australia? Like, where is it?
I think it's the European market, Australia combination. We like Brazil. I think those are markets that during 2025 will see growth from sort of the Avicanna side. I think Canada is going to be another one. And I think 2025 for me, I believe, is going to be the year where we have more catalysts, like major catalysts in terms of not just pharmaceutical, clinical development, etc., but also strategic partnerships. I think we're seeing the entrance of Fortune 100 companies.
Hmm.
I think they are sort of more sophisticated, unfortunately, today than the investment community that just puts everything cannabis into one bucket. They're sort of signaling out the Avicannas of the world for their IP, their infrastructure, their platforms, their vertical integration that's necessary. And we're starting to see more of those. So I think this will be a year where strategic partnerships, M&A opportunities will also happen as sort of a bonus in parallel with sort of the sustained growth that we expect.
I can't help but listen to you, and I can't help but feel that I understand people's frustration in the space right now, but there's still a lot of progress and a lot of great work that's being done behind the scenes. And as soon as we start to see a change, I think this is going to change rapidly because it's just been so much anticipation in a lot of ways. And I don't want to keep bringing up the U.S. market, but let's face it, if things change from a medical standpoint and a rescheduling standpoint, I think people are really going to start to see not only in the U.S., but look where the medical opportunity is going to present across the world and how people and more governments are viewing this differently, don't you think?
Absolutely, I think that will, but I always tell you, I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I hear you.
Pretty because it's happening anyways.
Yeah, last thing I wanted to ask was news this week regarding a slight delay in your filing with your auditors. However, it's been done. And like I said, you reported your latest financials, which were great. So what's the latest that we should know about this? And really, what should your investor community take away from all this?
I mean, yeah, this was a hiccup caused by our auditors, but we've been working with these guys for several years. We weren't expecting them to have an administrative gap, so it was a bit of a licensing, like a domestic licensing issue in Canada for them to actually file the audit that had been completed. Unfortunately, the TSX doesn't really have a lot of that, or the Inter Securities Commission doesn't really have a lot of leeway. If you're filing on Monday, you're filing Monday, and we found out on Friday that they're missing an administrative licensing part in their process that they found out last minute as well. We were able to get an extension in the form of an MCTO, and they were able to resolve the issue and file. And it's for my side, it was something that was already completed. We had already signed off on. Luckily, they took the blame, and we were able to disclose that to both the market and the commission, and they accepted it. So it's a bit of a freak accident, I would say, unfortunately, but the result, ends up being on us, right? Unfortunately, in these type of situations as a public company. But again, we're glad to have resolved it, moved past it, put out amazing results, which I was super excited to put
Yeah,
out
of course.
and go on.
Yeah. All right. So the takeaway here is that end of discussion, closed door, move on, nothing more to look into in this, correct?
Yeah, it was an administrative, again, licensing thing, but they sorted it out. In the future, obviously, we're going to ensure that these things are done. I mean, your auditor is supposed to have these things in place, especially when you've been working with them for many years, right? So it was a bit of a, I would say, curveball, but we're fine. We're back out.
Yeah. Well, look, we'd like to have you on because we always talk about the medical side and, really getting educated on what it looks like once we start to see more reform change, but more importantly, just your story that you're building out. And we've said to people time and time again about how your focus has been medical, but it's good to see great examples with the Canadian Pain Association. When's that event? Is it in May or June?
First week of May, and then our own symposium is something that your audience can attend virtually as well. It's the Avicanna
Okay.
Symposium. We press release that; it's on our website. You're going to have some of the biggest thought leaders in Canada, United States, actually presenting developments in cannabinoids. So it's available virtually. People can register and dial in and watch. Something we do every year. It's getting bigger and bigger every year. So we are doing a lot of these type of things, and I know a lot of your audience obviously are big fans of the potential of cannabinoids for medicine.
For
So I
sure.
think there's a lot of promising developments, and it's worth watching.
It's great. Well, listen, keep up the great work. Nice job, obviously, this week. And, best of luck, obviously, moving forward here in 2025. But it's a good story that's building. But why? You stuck to one thing and did it really well. That's the things that you got to do in business and not blur your messaging. But congrats to you and your team. Tell the whole team that we say hi. And more importantly, let's keep in touch. Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chad.
All right. Thanks, Aras. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. What'd you all think? Is there any information that we're missing? Is there anything you want us to cover? As these industries heat up, we're getting access to more and more big hosts. So let us know the questions that you want us to ask for you. As usual, smash that like button. We want this to go viral. Click on that bell for all notifications for the latest interviews that we're doing. And as usual, let's build this community. Subscribe to our channel because we appreciate it, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.